A Passage to India by E.M. Forster, Chapter 2. Abandoning his bicycle, which fell before a servant could catch it, the young man sprang up on the veranda. He was all animation. "Hamidullah! Hamidullah! Am I late?" he cried. "Do not apologize," said his host. "You're always late." "Kindly answer my question. Am I late? Has Muhammad Ali eaten all the food? If so, I go elsewhere. Mr. Muhammad Ali, how are you?" "Thank you, Dr. Aziz. I am dying." "Dying before dinner? Oh, poor Muhammad Ali. Hamidullah here is actually dead. He passed away just as you rode up on your bike." "Yes, that is so," said the other. "Imagine us both as addressing you from another and a happier world." Does there happen to be such a thing as a hookah in this happier world of yours?" "Aziz, don't chatter. We're having a very sad talk." The hookah had been packed too tight, as was usual in his friend's house, and bubbled sulkily. He coaxed it. Yielding at last, the tobacco jetted up into his lungs and nostrils, driving out the smoke of burning cow dung that had filled them as he rode through the bazaar. It was delicious. He lay in a trance, sensuous but healthy, through which the talk of the two others did not seem particularly sad. They were discussing as to whether or no it is possible to be friends with an Englishman. Muhammad Ali, Mahmoud, second name Ali, Ali, argued that it was not. Hamidullah disagreed, but with so many reservations that there was no friction between them. Delicious indeed to lie on the broad veranda, with the moon rising in front and the servants preparing dinner behind, and no trouble happening. "Well, look at my own experience this morning." "I only contend that it is possible in England," replied Hamidullah, who had been to that country long ago, before the big rush, and had received a cordial welcome at Cambridge. "It is impossible here, Aziz. The red-nosed boy has again insulted me in court. I do not blame him. He was told that he ought to insult me. Until lately he was quite a nice boy, but the others have got hold of him. Yes, they have no chance here. That is my point. They come out intending to be gentlemen, and are told it will not do. Look at Leslie. Look at Blakiston. Leslie, Lesley. Look at Blakiston, Blakiston. Now it is your red-nosed boy, and Fielding will go next. Fielding, Fielding. Why, I remember when Turton, Turton, came out first. It was in another part of the province. You fellows will not believe me, but I've driven with Turton in his carriage. Turton! Ah, yes, we were once quite intimate. He has shown me his stamp collection. He would expect you to steal it now. Turton! But red-nosed boy will be far worse than Turton. I do not think so. They all become exactly the same, not worse, not better. I gave an Englishman 2 years, be he Turton or Burton. It is only the difference of a letter, and I give any English woman 6 months. All are alike, exactly. Do you not agree with me?" "I do not agree," replied Muhammad Ali, entering into the bitter fun and feeling both pain and amusement at each word that was uttered. For my own part, I find such profound differences among your rulers, our rulers, that is. Red-Nose mumbles. Turton talks distinctly. Mrs. Turton takes bribes. Mrs. Red-Nose does not and cannot, because so far there is no Mrs. Red-Nose. Bribes? Did you not know that when they were lent to Central India over a canal scheme, some Rajah or other gave her a sewing machine in solid gold so that the water would run through his state? And it does? No, that is where Mrs. Turton is so skillful. When we poor blacks take bribes, we perform what we are bribed to perform, and the law discovers us as consequence. The English take and do nothing. I admire them. We all admire them, Aziz. Please, pass me the hookah. Oh, not yet. Hookah is so jolly now. Can you imagine what the hookah is? You are a very selfish boy. He ran his voice suddenly and shouted for dinner. Servants shouted back that it was ready. They meant that they wished it was ready, and were so understood, for nobody moved. Then Hamadullah continued, but with changed manner and evident motion. But take my case, the case of young Hugh Bannister. Hugh, H-U-G-H, Bannister, B-A-N-N-I-S-T-E-R. Here is the son of my dead friends, the Reverend and Mrs. Bannister, whose goodness to me in England I shall never forget or describe. They were father and mother to me. I talk to them as I do now. In the vacations, their rectory became my house. They entrusted all their children to me. I often carried little Hugh about. I took him up to the funeral of the Queen Victoria, and held him in my arms above the crowd. Queen Victoria was different. Queen Victoria was different, murmured Muhammad Ali. I know now that this boy is in business as a leather merchant at Cawnpore, C-A-W-N-P-O-R-E. Imagine how I long to see him, and I pay his fare that this house may be his own. And to pay his fare, that is, that this house may be his own. But it is useless. The other Anglo-Indians will have got hold of him long ago. He will probably think that I want something, and I cannot face that from the son of my old friends. Oh, what in this country has gone wrong with everything? Vakil Sahib, I ask you. Vakil Sahib, I ask you. Aziz joined in. Why talk about the English? Bah! Why be either friends with the fellows or not friends? Let us shut them out and be jolly. Queen Victoria and Mr. and Mrs. Bannister were the only exceptions, and they're dead. No, I do not admit that. I have met others. So have I, said Muhammad Ali, unexpectedly veering. All ladies are far from alike. Their mood was changed, and they recalled little kindness and courtesies. She said thank you so much in the most natural way. She offered a lozenge when the dust irritated my throat. Hamadullah could remember more important examples of angelic ministration, but the other, who only knew Anglo-Indian, had to ransack his memory for scraps, and it was not surprising that he should return to, but of course all this is exceptional. The exception does not prove the rule. The average woman is like Mrs. Turton, and Aziz, you know what she is. Aziz did not know, but he said he did. He too generalized from his disappointments. It is difficult for members of a subject race to do otherwise. Granted the exceptions, he agreed that all Englishwomen are haughty and venal. Venal. The gleam passed from the conversation, whose wintry surface unrolled and expanded interminably. A servant announced dinner. They ignored him. The elder men had reached their eternal politics. Aziz drifted into the garden. The trees smelt sweet, green-blossomed champak, Champak, and scraps of Persian poetry came into his head. Dinner, dinner, dinner. But when he returned to the house for it, Mahmud Ali had drifted away in his turn to speak to his sais. Come and see my wife a little then, said Hamidullah, and they spent 20 minutes behind the purdah. Hamidullah began with a distant aunt of Aziz, and the only female relative he had in Chandrapur. She had much to say to him on this occasion about a family circumcision that had been celebrated with imperfect pomp. It was difficult to get away, because until they had their dinner, she would not begin hers, and consequently prolonged her remarks in case they should suppose she was impatient. Having censored the circumcision, she bethought her a kindred topics, and asked Aziz when he was going to be married. Respectful but irritated, he answered, "Once is enough." Yes, he has done his duty, said Hamidullah. Do not tease him so. He carries on his family, 2 boys and their sister. Aunt, they live most comfortably with my wife's mother, where she was living when she died. I can see them whenever I like. They're very, very small children. And he sends them the whole of his salary and lives like a low-grade clerk and tells no one the reason. What more do you require him to do? But this was not Hamidullah Begum's, B-E-G-U-M, Hamidullah Begum's point, and having courteously changed the conversation for a few minutes, she returned and made it. She said, "What is to become of all our daughters if men refuse to marry? They will marry beneath them, or..." And she began the off tale of a lady of imperial descent who could find no husband in the narrow circle where her pride permitted her to mate, and had lived on unwed, her age now 30, and would die unwed, for no one would have her now. While the tale was in progress, it convinced the 2 men the tragedy seemed a slur on the whole community. Both polygamy almost, then that of a woman should die without the joys God intended her to receive. Wedlock, motherhood, power in the house, for what else is she born? And how can the man who has denied them to her stand up to face her Creator and his own at the last day? Aziz took his leave, saying, "Perhaps, but later," his invariable reply to such an appeal. "You mustn't put off what you think right," said Hamidullah. "That is why India is in such a plight, because we put off things." But seeing that his young relative looked worried, he added a few soothing words and thus wiped out any impression that his wife might have made. During their absence, Mahmud Ali had gone off in his carriage, leaving a message that he should be back in a few minutes, but they were on no account to wait. They sat down to meat with a distant cousin of the house, Muhammad Latif, Latif, who lived in Hamidullah's bounty and who occupied the position neither of a servant nor of an equal. He did not speak unless spoken to, and since no one spoke, kept unoffended silence. Kept unoffended silence. Now and then he belched in compliment to the richness of the food. A gentle, happy, and dishonest old man. All his life he had never done a stroke of work. So long as some one of his relatives had a house, he was sure to have a home, and it was unlikely that so large a family would all go bankrupt. His wife led a similar existence some hundreds of miles away. He did not visit her, owing to his expense of the railway ticket. Presently Aziz chaffed him, also the servants, and then began quoting poetry, Persian, Urdu, a little Arabic. His memory was good, and for so young of a man, he had read largely. The themes he preferred were the decay of Islam and the brevity of love. They listened delighted, for they took the public view of poetry, not the private which obtains in England. It never bored them to hear words. They breathed them with the cool night air, never stopping to analyze. The name of the poet, Hafiz Ali Iqbal. Hafiz, H-A-F-I-Z. Hali, H-A-L-I. Iqbal, I-Q-B-A-L. That name was sufficient guarantee. India, 100 Indias, whispered outside beneath the indifferent moon. But for the time, India seemed one and their own, and they regained their departed greatness by hearing its departure lamented. They felt young again because reminded that youth must fly. A servant in scarlet interrupted him. He was the Chuprasi of the civil surgeon, and he handed Aziz a note. Chuprasi, C-H-U-P-R-A-S-S-I. C-H-U-P-R-A-S-S-I. Old Calendar wants to see me at his bungalow, he said, not rising. He might have the politeness to say why. Some case, I dare say. I dare say not. I dare say nothing. He has found out our dinner hour, that's all, and chooses to interrupt us every time in order to show his power. On the one hand, he always does this. On the other, it may be a serious case, and you cannot know, said Hamidullah, considerately paving the way towards obedience. Had you not better clean your teeth after pan? Had you not better clean your teeth after pan? If my teeth are to be cleaned, I don't go at all. I am an Indian. It is an Indian habit to take pan. The civil surgeon must put up with it. Mohammed Latif, my bike, please. The poor relation got up, slightly immersed in the realms of the matter. He laid his hand on the bicycle saddle, while a servant did the actual wheeling. Between them, they took it over a tin tack, T-I-N-T-A-K. Aziz held his hands under the ewer, E-W-E-R, dried them, fitted on his green felt hat, and then, with unexpected energy, whizzed out of Hamidullah's compound. Aziz, imprudent boy! But he was far down the bazaar, riding furiously. He had neither light nor bell, nor had he a brake. But what use are such adjuncts in a land where the cyclist only hope is to coast from face to face, and just before he collides with each, it vanishes. And the city was fairly empty at this hour. When his tire went flat, he leapt off and shouted for a tonga, T-O-N-G-A. And tire, which meant the tire of the bike, is spelled T-Y-R-A. He did not at first find one. He had also to dispose of his bicycle at a friend's house. He dallied furthermore to clean his teeth. But at last he was rattling towards the civil lines with a vivid sense of speed. As he entered their arid tidiness, depression suddenly seized him. The roads, named after victorious generals and intersecting at right angles, were symbolic of the net Great Britain had thrown over India. He felt caught in their meshes. When he turned into Major Calendar's compound, he could with difficulty restrain himself from getting down from the tonga and approaching the bungalow on foot, and this not because his soul was servile, but because his feelings, the sensitive edges of him, feared a gross snub. Let me go back and spell Major Calendar. Callendar. Okay. There had been a case last year. An Indian gentleman had driven up to an official's house and been turned back by the servants and been told to approach more suitably. Only one case among thousands of visits to hundreds of officials, but its fame spread wide. The young man shrank from a repetition of it. He compromised and stopped the driver just outside the flood of light that fell across the veranda. The civil surgeon was out. But the sahib had left me some message. The servant returned an indifferent no. Aziz was in despair. It was a servant whom he had forgotten to tip, and he could do nothing now because there were no people in the hall. He was convinced that there was a message and that the man was withholding it out of revenge. While they argued, the people came out. Both were ladies. Aziz lifted his hat. The first, who was in evening dress, glanced at the Indian and turned instinctively away. "Mrs. Leslie, it is a tonga," she cried. "Ours?" inquired the second, also seeing Aziz and doing likewise. Take the gifts the God gives. Take the gifts the God provides anyhow," she screeched, and both jumped in. "Oh, tonga, walla, club, why does the fool go?" "So, go, I will pay you tomorrow," said Aziz to the driver. As they went off, he called courteously, "You are most welcome, ladies." They did not reply, being full of their own affairs. So it had come, the usual thing. Just as Muhammad Ali said, the inevitable snub, his bow ignored, his carriage taken. It might have been worse, for it comforted him somewhat that Mesdames Calendar and Leslie should both be fat and weigh the tonga down behind. Beautiful women would have pained him. He turned to the servant, gave him a couple of rupees, and asked again whether there was a message. The man, now very civil, returned the same answer. Major Calendar had driven away half an hour before. Say nothing. He had, as a matter of fact, said, "Damn Aziz," words that the servant understood, but was too polite to repeat. One can tip too much as well as too little. Indeed, the coin that buys the exact truth has not yet been minted. "Then I will write him a letter." He was offered the use of the house, but was too dignified to enter it. Paper and ink were brought on to the veranda. He began, "Dear sir, at your express command, I have hastened as a subordinate should." And then he stopped. "Tell him I've called. That is sufficient," he said, tearing the protest up. "Here's my card. Call me a tonga." "Hazur, all are at the club." "Huzur, Huzoor. Huzoor. All are at the club. Then telephone for one down to the railway station. And since the man hastened to do this, he said, enough, enough, I prefer to walk. He commandeered a match and lit a cigarette. These attentions, though purchases, soothed him. These attentions, though purchased, soothed him. Okay. He commandeered a match and lit a cigarette. These attentions, though purchased, soothed him. They would last as long as he had rupees, which is something. But to shake the dust of Anglo-India off his feet, woo! To escape from the net and be back amongst manners and gestures that he knew, he began a walk, an unwanted exercise. He was an athlete. He was an athletic little man, daintily put together, but really very strong. Nevertheless, walking fatigued him, as it fatigues everyone in India except the newcomer. There's something hostile in that soil. It either yields and the foot sinks into a depression, or else it's unexpectedly rigid and sharp, pressing stones or crystals against the tread. A series of these little surprises exhausts, and he was wearing pumps, a poor preparation for any country. At the edge of the civil station, he turned into a mosque to rest. He had always liked this mosque. It was gracious, and the arrangement pleased him. The courtyard, entered through a ruined gate, contained an ablution tank of fresh, clear water, which was always in motion, being indeed part of a conduit that supplied the city. The courtyard was paved with broken slabs. The covered part of the mosque was deeper than is usual. Its effect was that of an English parish church whose side has been taken out. Where he sat, he looked into 3 arcades, whose darkness was illuminated by a small hanging lamp and by the moon. The front, in full moonlight, had the appearance of marble, and the 99 games of God on the frieze stood out black, as the frieze, Frieze, stood out white against the sky. The contest between this dualism and the contention of shadows within pleased Aziz, and he tried to symbolize the whole into some truth of religion or love. A mosque, by winning his approval, let loose his imagination. The temple of another creed, Hindu, Christian, or Greek, would have bored and failed to awaken his sense of beauty. Here was Islam, his own country, more than a faith, more than a battle cry, more, much more. Islam, an attitude towards both life, both exquisite and durable, that is, towards life, both exquisite and durable, where his body and his thoughts found their home. His seat was the low wall that bounded the country, the courtyard on the left. The ground fell away beneath him towards the city, visible as a blur of trees, and in the stillness he heard many small sounds. On the right, over in the club, the English community contributed an amateur orchestra. Elsewhere, some Hindus were drumming. He knew they were Hindus because the rhythm was uncongenial to him, and others were bewailing a corpse. He knew whose, having certified it in the afternoon. There were owls, a Punjab mail. The flowers smelt deliciously in the station master's garden. But the mosque, that alone signified, and he returned to it from the complex appeal of the night, and decked it with meanings the building had never intended. Some day he too would build a mosque smaller than this, but in perfect taste, so that all who passed by should experience the happiness he felt now. And near it, under a low dome, should be his tomb with a Persian inscription: "Alas, without me for thousands of years, the rose will bloom and the spring will bloom. But those who have secretly understood my heart, they will approach and visit the grave where I lie." He had seen the quatrain on the tomb of a Deacon King and regarded it as profound philosophy. He always held pathos to be profound. The secret understanding of the heart. He repeated the phrase with tears in his eyes, and as he did, so one of the pillars of the mosques seemed to quiver. It swayed in the gloom and detached itself. Belief in ghosts ran in his blood, but he sat firm. Another pillar moved, a third, and then an Englishwoman stepped out into the moonlight. Suddenly he was furiously angry and shouted, "Madame! Madame! Madame!" "Oh, oh, oh!" the woman gasped. "Madame, this is a mosque. You have no right here. You have no right here at all. You should have taken off your shoes. This is a holy place for Muslims." "I have taken them off." "You have?" "I left them at the entrance." "Then I ask your pardon." Still startled, the woman moved out, keeping the ablution tank between them. He called after her, "I am truly sorry for speaking." "Yes, I was right, was I not? If I remove my shoes, I am allowed." "Of course, but so few ladies take the trouble, especially if thinking no one is there to see." "That makes no difference. God is here." "Madame!" "Please let me go." "Oh, can I do you some service now or at any time?" "No, thank you. Really, none. Good night." "May I know your name?" She was now in the shadow of the gateway, so that he could not see her face, but she saw his and said, with a change of her voice, "Mrs. Moore." "Mrs." Advancing, he found that she was old. A fabric bigger than the mosque fell to pieces, and he did not know whether he was glad or sorry. She was older than Hamidullah Begum, with a red face and white hair. Her voice had deceived him. Moore is spelled Moore. "Mrs. Moore, I am afraid I startled you. I shall tell my community, our friends, about you, that God is here. Very good, very fine indeed. I think you are newly arrived in India." "Yes. How did you know?" "By the way you address me." "No, but can I call you to a carriage?" "By the way you address me." "No, but can I call you to a carriage?" "I have only come from the club. They're doing a play that I've seen in London, and it was so hot." "What was the name of the play?" "Cousin Kate." "I think you ought not to walk at night alone, Mrs. Moore. There are bad characters about, and leopards may come across from the Marabar hills. Snakes also." She exclaimed she had forgotten the snakes. "For example, a six-spot beetle?" he continued. "For example, a six-spot beetle," he continued. "You pick it up, it bites, you die." "But you walk about yourself." "Oh, I am used to it." "Used to snakes?" They both laughed. "I'm a doctor," he said. "Snakes don't dare bite me." They sat down side by side in the entrance and slipped on their evening shoes. "Please, may I ask you a question now?" Why do you come to India at this time of year, just as the cold weather is ending? I intended to start earlier, but there was an unavoidable delay. It will soon be so unhealthy for you. And why ever do you come to Chandrapur? To visit my son. He is the city magistrate here. Oh no, excuse me. That is quite impossible. Our city magistrate is named Mr. Heaslop. I know him intimately. He's my son all the same, she said, smiling. But Mrs. Moore, how can that be? I was married twice. Oh, yes, now I see. And your first husband died. He did, and so did my second husband. Then we are in the same box, he said cryptically. Then is the city magistrate the entire of your family now? No, there are younger ones, Ralph and Stella in England. And the gentleman here, is he Ralph and Stella's half-brother? Quite right. Mrs. Moore, this is all extremely strange, because like yourself, I have also 2 sons and a daughter. Is not this the same box with a vengeance? What are their names? Not also Ronnie, Ralph, and Stella, surely. The suggestion delighted him. No, indeed. How funny it sounds. Their names are quite different and will surprise you. Listen, please. I'm about to tell you my children's names. The first is called Ahmed, Ahmed. The second is called Karim, Karim. The third, she's the eldest, Jamila, Jemila. 3 children are enough. Do you agree with me? Oh, I do. They were both silent for a little, thinking of their respective families. She sighed and rose to go. Would you care to see over the Minto Hospital one morning? He inquired. Would you care to see over the Minto, M-I-N-T-O, hospital one morning? He inquired. I have nothing else to offer at Chandrapur. Oh, thank you. I have seen it already, or I should have liked to come with you very much. I suppose the civil surgeon took you? Yes, and Mrs. Callender. His voice altered. Ah, a very charming lady. Possibly, when you knows her better. What? You didn't like her? She was certainly intending to be kind, but I did not find her exactly charming. He burst out with, She has just taken my tonga without my permission. Do you call that being charming? And Major Callender interrupts me night after night from where I am dining with my friends, and I go at once, breaking up a most pleasant entertainment. And he is not there, and not even a message. Oh. So that's what he said. Oh, so when he said, a very charming lady, he was being sarcastic. So he continues, Is this charming, pray? But what does it matter? I can do nothing, and he knows nothing. I am just a subordinate. My time is of no value. The veranda is good enough for an Indian. Yes, let him stand, and Miss Callender takes my carriage and cuts me dead. She listened. He was excited partly by his wrongs, but much more by the knowledge that someone sympathized with him. It was this that led him to repeat, exaggerate, contradict. It was this that led him to repeat, exaggerate, contradict. She had proved her sympathy by criticizing her fellow countrywoman to him, but even earlier he had known. The flame that not even beauty could nourish was springing up, and though his words were querulous, his heart began to glow secretly. Presently it burst into speech. You understand me. You know what others feel. Oh, if others resembled you. Rather surprised, she replied, I don't think I understand people very well. I only know whether I like or dislike them. Then you are an Oriental. She accepted his escort back to the club and said at the gate that she wished she was a member so that she could have asked him in. She wished she was a member. Okay, so that she could have asked him in. Indians are not allowed in the Chandrapur Club. Even as guests, he said simply. He did not expatiate on his wrongs now, being happy. As he strolled downhill beneath the lovely moon and again saw the lovely mosque, he seemed to own the land as much as anyone else owned it. What did it matter if a few flabby Hindus had preceded him there and a few chilly English succeeded? That's the end of chapter 2.